Governor Hogan, about a week and a half left in office. Looking to the legislative session, we've heard a lot of conversations about what can be done. We're hearing Ivan Bates talk pretty strongly about mandatory minimums. Is that a surprise to you to hear that?
No, it's not really. I've spent quite a bit of time with Ivan Bates, and I'm really encouraged by the fact that he seems to be one of the few leaders in Baltimore City that really wants to focus on doing something about the violent crime. I mean, this is something that 85% of the people in Baltimore agree with, and most people in the state agree with, but the city leaders have been opposed to. And I think it's a big step that you have a state's attorney that wants to focus on getting tough on really bad violent criminals. And I talked with the incoming governor about it. I've talked with the U.S. Attorney Eric Barron about it, and I'm hoping that I can tell you that this is what people in Baltimore and the rest of the state want. And I know it'll be a huge step if they can get that passed. I mean, it's frustrating to me. It's one of the things that we tried so hard for 8 years under 4 mayors and 5 police commissioners. We couldn't get it done. We passed it in the Senate twice and couldn't get it through the House. But if the city leaders in Baltimore finally come to their senses and start pushing for it, it can get done and make a huge difference in lowering, the amount of murders that happen in the city.
We took what Ivan Bates has been saying to Mayor Brandon Scott just last week, asking if he would throw his support behind it, because like you said, he hasn't really said anything or has been working against some of these mandatory minimums that have been introduced. He said that there are already mandatory minimums on the books, and that's it. Didn't really say yes or no. Do you think that he really needs to change his tune given the fact that he is the mayor? I know he's not in Annapolis, but he does carry a lot of weight in the city.
Well, no question about that. When the city leaders opposed the legislation every year that stopped the Baltimore City delegation, didn't want to pass the bills, and that swung other votes against it in the House. In spite of that, we passed the Senate, but it's the House was listening to them. So I've talked to every single one. I've had 4 mayors since I've been governor. Every one of them, I've talked at length every year about this bill, and a couple of them even said privately, I agree with this, but I can't do it politically. And they start arguing about things like, mass incarceration. I was like, look, I passed criminal justice reform. We lowered the prison population by more than 49 other states. Yeah. But this is talking about a small group of really violent repeat offenders that we have to get off the street. They have to be held accountable. And none of them were on board, and now we're starting to get more and more. But look, I still think it needs to happen. I don't want to, I'm not going to be second guessing what the legislature or the new governor does, but I certainly let all of them know on the way out the door that I think that's their most important job.
We saw just last week there was a town hall. It was the first time that we had seen the U.S. Attorney, the new Attorney General, Ivan Bates, and the police commissioner, as well as Isabel Cumming, on stage together talking about public safety. There does seem to be a new united front, a tougher on crime approach in the city. Do you think that'll help?
I saw the town hall, and I thought it was good to see them all in the same room because that hadn't happened in the past. And I think the new state's attorney and the new U.S. attorney, having them very involved is a departure from the past. I was disappointed that the mayor wasn't there because this is his most important priority, and he's got to focus on it.
There was a moment where I thought it was interesting where Anthony Brown seemed to depart a little bit from what the others were saying in terms of juvenile crime. He talked about his concern with just locking kids up and not really helping. We saw juvenile justice reform get through last year, but now there's a concern that these kids just are getting off without any consequences. We saw Anne Arundel County Police just last week say they had a kid with a gun in school and they couldn't do anything about it. Is that something that the lawmakers need to revisit to make sure that there is a loophole?
Well, they do need to revisit it. So I mentioned years ago we passed criminal justice reform. It was the first one in the country. The federal government actually followed us, and a couple of other states did. But the most recent bills last year, one of them I vetoed, and one of them I allowed to go into signature because we couldn't, stop it. But I didn't support either one of them. I do think we were willing to talk about doing things like we did for adults, lowering sentencing and trying to keep young kids out of prison, and so they don't get trapped in that world. But for people teenagers committing felonies with guns, they need to be held accountable, and that was the problem I had with the bill. The bill needs to be fixed. The perfect example was Anne Arundel County, where we had a 12-year-old, and they can't be charged at all. And the school's going to have to handle it, but they can't be charged with anything. That's crazy.
Does it send the wrong message? I mean, in the city, we're seeing juveniles. PG County seeing the same thing, carjackings, squeegeeing. I know that's changing tomorrow, but still.
Yeah, well, some people are taking it more seriously than others. In Prince George's County, they've got a crime issue, but the county executive, Angela Alsobrooks, is taking, dramatic action. She's instituting curfews, and she's keeping kids off the streets so they're not committing crimes. And she seems to be, supporting police in their efforts to kind of break up some of these criminal gang activities. And I think Baltimore needs to maybe follow the lead of the folks in Prince George's County.
Looking ahead, obviously, you've got a week and a half. Wednesday is...
You don't have to keep reminding me about the week and a half.
Are you sad about it? Are you getting a little sad?
I'm not really sad. It's obviously a big turning point, but I feel like a sense of accomplishment. I feel like I came and did what I came to do. I did what I promised to do, and it's been 8 years. And in some ways, it seems like it just started yesterday. In other ways, it seems like a long, long time. And I'm ready for the next challenge or opportunity. I don't feel like I'm not digging my fingers into the carpet. They're not dragging me away. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep working for the through the end. I'm going to leave it all in the field, and then I'm going to go see what else I'm going to do.
When lawmakers do come back on Wednesday, looking ahead to the next 90 days, we have obviously a one-party rule in the state. We're seeing that in other states across the country. Does it worry you about a left-leaning legislature and what that means for the future of Maryland?
Well, sure it does. That's why I ran for governor in the first place. I mean, Maryland is the bluest state in America. Donald Trump lost Maryland by 33 points, far more than California or New York, New Jersey, Oregon, any of those other states. And 70% of our legislature is Democrat. All of the elected officials are Democrat. That's the way it was in 2014 before I ran. And I think people, even if they were Democrats or independents, they voted for me because they wanted to see some balance. They wanted to see checks and balances. And we're leaving with 75% of them happy with the job that we did and happy with the direction the state is heading. So I think there's something to not swinging too far to the left or too far to the right, but finding that balance. I think it's what voters want. But there could be a tendency for them to swing too far to the left and go back to taxing and spending, and that's how they finally elected a Republican governor twice.
So we'll see what happens.
We'll see how they do.
Yeah. Looking at last weekend in D.C., how do you feel about the Republican Party?
Well, I thought it was a clown show. I thought it was ridiculous and embarrassing and kind of exactly what I've been talking about for years. I've been saying, that Washington is broken, that there's nothing but divisiveness and dysfunction, that there's performative politics where people care more about, getting, followed on Twitter or getting likes on Facebook or getting their face on television saying or doing some outrageous thing. That was like, hey, we finally barely elected Republicans back in the House. Let's show them how we can lead. That they didn't. They were like, why in the heck did we put these guys in charge? So it was a huge mistake, and it was bad for the country, bad for the Republican Party, and particularly bad for those clowns in Washington that were responsible for it.
Do you think Kevin McCarthy can be an effective speaker and a leader after what just happened?
I hope so. I mean, I think it's important for us to push for common sense, conservative solutions. Like we were talking in Maryland, I think we do need some balance in Washington, but he's got his work cut out for him. It didn't help any.
Today's National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. Obviously, there's been a lot of rhetoric the last couple of years surrounding law enforcement. What's your message to the community today?
Well, I have been backing law enforcement from day one. I mean, the people that put their lives on the line every day for the rest of us, they deserve our appreciation and respect. I pushed when everybody was talking about defunding the police. We had a city councilman in Baltimore talking about eliminating the police. I put $500 million more into state and local police, our Refund the Police initiative. I'm going to be meeting with law enforcement officers from all around the state today and thanking them, as I do every single year on Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. But for me, every day is Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. Everywhere I go, all across the state, every single day, wherever I am, I stop and thank a state trooper, a local, municipal police officer, a county officer, a deputy sheriff, and say thank you for what you do every day.
I know you said obviously you haven't made any decisions about what's next for you, but you didn't run for Senate against Senator Van Hollen. Is 2024 Senate a possibility for you?
I just don't really have any desire to be in the Senate. So,
that's what Steve Bullock said when he ran for president, and then he did run for Senate.
Well, that was Steve, and he's a friend of mine. We worked together in NGA, but Yeah, I just never wanted to be a senator. The Washington Post had a poll saying I'd beat Van Hollen by 12 points, and I said, well, thank you, but I don't want to go do that job. I'm an executive. I've been running things my whole life. I founded and ran a number of businesses, and then I ran the state. Being one of 100 guys arguing all day and seemingly getting nothing done is not the way I want to, spend my next productive years.
All right, we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Kai Jackson. Thank you for watching. Here's another video to watch. Also, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel.